Hi, I'm Greg Moores, and welcome to the Life Camp Show. Our topic today is the history of education. You were taught reading, writing, and arithmetic in school, but you were not taught how to have fantastic relationships, how to create meaningful, fulfilling experiences at will, or how to make a lot of money. And today, you're going to find out why. Our guest has studied the history of education from a very deep and around the back kind of perspective, where you're going to get details that you never even thought you could comprehend from a school environment. So please welcome our guest, Clinton Swaine.
Thanks a lot, Greg. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you, Clinton. I remember a conversation we had that was so compelling, and that's why I have you here in the show. The history of education. You spent 3 months studying 1,800 biographies of some of the world's most successful people and most powerful people, and you discovered that they didn't get all that education in school.
Absolutely. What I found was I had 3 months downtime from investment deals, and I sat there and read all these different biographies and just absorbed a huge amount of information. And I got to distill a perspective of education that most people don't understand.
So you studied education not from the way school approaches it. You actually wanted to take the lives of the people that were incredibly successful, and find out, distill down the essence of how they got educated. So tell me, where did you start?
Way, way back. I mean, we're talking ancient times. We're talking Egypt, Greece. If you were an average citizen in those areas there, the chance of you finding that great job, that great money, building wealth was so slim. Because basically you were born into a certain society, and the chance for growth never existed. And the thing with those sort of societies was all the wealth and knowledge, all the stuff that makes life rich, was down to a very small number of people. They got all control of that knowledge. And so to really understand education, we start to study the history of knowledge. And by understanding where knowledge has gone through time, we get a whole different perspective.
So this is the caste system. It's
the
basically
system,
whoever...
The emperor, the pharaoh, the leader.
And only the people at the top of the pyramid are the people that got to be educated.
They got to have the education, the wealth, the success, and everything they had. And everyone else is basically at serfdom, slave labor, working for someone else.
And by keeping them from being educated about how they could be empowered or how they could actually, create something for themselves in their life, they kept them as slaves.
Absolutely. That was how society was. Very rigid, very structured. And as we move through time, we start looking at gradual evolution. We look to sort of feudalism systems with the king and the court and the nobles and a greater construction of wealth sort of beginning to filter down.
But still, that was pretty medieval and controlled.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you questioned the king, you got your head chopped off. If they caught you learning something, you got your head chopped off. So why is it that education was kept so secret for so long?
Well, you have a look at what the education was. And this gets on to a very interesting topic, which I know you're going to be fascinated with in a moment. You look for a period of time up through the Dark Ages where most knowledge wasn't even available. And then you have these groups, which gets down to like the Knights Templars, which are now very popular through the National Treasure and other movies like that, the Da Vinci Code.
What is the era of the Knights Templar? So
you're talking around 1100 to 1300.
Okay.
You're talking through Europe. You're talking about most of the construction was very mediocre. There wasn't the great cathedrals. I mean, you measure the cathedrals, there was a period of 200 to 300 years where building just flourished, where there was a whole new period of knowledge came about.
So what happened? This ancient Egyptian wisdom all of a sudden was rediscovered in the 11th century?
Well, you look at the construction, the pyramids, construction of those ancient areas, and there was a big area where it sort of disappeared. And then there was rumor was they went and ransacked the area of King Solomon's temple. They found all those sacred texts, all about the history of knowledge and construction. And very shortly around that time of the Knights Templars, we had a massive building boom across Europe. These massive cathedrals coming up with flying buttresses that weren't around in history before then. So there was definitely a transformational point there that happened. And also part of that, what it was this new knowledge got distilled very quickly and dispersed across Europe.
Now, the Knights Templars weren't just good at building buildings. These guys had a reputation for being incredibly powerful and fierce warriors.
Absolutely. And what they also don't know is they were the world's first banking system. You could actually have a check, write a check in Vienna, and actually travel to the other side of Europe and cash that check.
All through the network of the Knights Templars?
The Knights Templars had the first international banking system.
Okay, so who are these people?
Well, part of the Knights Templars was this valuable information that came from various different sources. And so they were scholars. And not only were they scholars, they were scholar knights. And so they dispersed this information all around Europe. Now, what you probably don't know is they got so powerful at one time, most of the kings and queens of Europe were so scared they actually went and persecuted them. And so on Friday the 13th, they round up the Knights Templars and execute a lot of them at the stake. That's why Friday the 13th is considered the bad, scary day, is because that's the day they tortured a lot of Knights Templars.
Just for having knowledge.
Because they were becoming such a powerful force throughout Europe.
More powerful than the kings and the queens and
absolutely. Now,
government.
Obviously, around the courts, you had a lot of valuable knowledge. Equally, a lot of these stonemason groups had a lot of knowledge. Because remember, the ability to build these vast temples, vast palaces, vast cathedrals, distilled down to the stonemasons who were able to build them. And so they were really the premier guilds at the time who had all this sacred knowledge. Now, most people couldn't read and write. So for you to learn, what these students began to teach you symbology of success and principles through tools. So various different symbols of tools would mean how to build the foundation of a great life.
So why, now question, if the kings and queens and all, they take these Knights Templars, they round them all up, what happened to their knowledge, the information that they had? Did they, why didn't they give them to the court, and why didn't the court gather that knowledge and then make it part of the kingdom?
Because back then it was considered sacred knowledge. It was divine knowledge. This ability to do advanced mathematical calculations, the ability to build vast structures, was considered sacred knowledge. It wasn't to be given to the average person.
So is this one of these things where the Knights Templars would die for protecting this knowledge or something? Or is this...
Absolutely. It was part of that guild, and then it grew from there with the stonemasons. And then as they kept building and building and building in their guilds, they kept it all internal. And at a certain point, they began opening it up to what was called speculative masons. And speculative masons are people who wanted to learn this vast, valuable information, but weren't actually stonemasons.
So the Knights Templars became the Masons.
The Knights Templars are associated to them. There was not a direct correlation,
okay,
but a lot of the information passed through their association into what became the Freemasons and what is now known as the speculative Freemasons.
So this is an underground history of education. What's happening on the surface while all that's going on?
As you keep going through, the Freemasons ended up having a lot of information. And a lot of the key leaders sort of merged into Freemasonry. Now, if I ask you, still at this time of history, there is no public schooling system. There is no way, if you want to become a great citizen, build great character, where do you go? There is no place to turn.
I always thought it was like the king's court. You had to be one of the courtiers or something,
Well, a lot of those people joined these guilds. And so these guilds ended up becoming the Freemasons and some of the other guilds at the time.
The snobbish groups of education.
The snobbish groups. So if you were a young man and you wanted to go and learn valuable information, you join these guilds. Now, some of the principles of these guilds is everyone is considered equal. So what would happen is, let's fast forward a little bit to the Revolutionary War. Now, you have, just prior to that, you have the English and the Americans fighting side by side against the French. Here they are as Freemasons, in the same lodge tents together, a general and a captain and a private, all in the same tent, all as equals. And so because they're all considered equals, they get to communicate, they get to share, they get to have a blood oath with each other. Fast forward to the American Revolutionary War, here you have a split. Here you have the Americans and the English who have had, as Freemasons, have had a blood pact not to fight each other, to support each other.
Really?
So here they go into battle head to head, and they're not allowed to fight each other by a blood oath. So here you have Lord Cornwallis representing the English, and here you have George Washington and many of the other Americans, sworn enemies, but blood brothers not allowed to fight. So there's an amazing book called Freemasonry in the American Revolutionary War that talks all about the underlying tenets of how these people ended up defying orders, actually changing the history of the war to not fight each other.
So bring me up to speed here. So we have the Egyptian, then it goes into the the knights and the kings, but underneath all that we have the Knights Templars.
We have a seed of valuable information. We have the principles of success and life and abundance, but it's handed down through these secret societies because it's so sacred information.
And when you say sacred, say more about that. Because, when you go to school, we learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we don't learn anything about, sacred knowledge.
Well, sacred knowledge is what it would be considered mystical back then. Understanding astrology, understanding the charts, understanding advanced mathematics, understanding the ability to build. These type of things which back then, you're talking about the church, you're talking about witchcraft, you're talking about all these type of principles of it's unknown knowledge. And so knowledge that was kept apart but was very valuable, we had this sort of spiritual sacredness about it.
So where did the thing snap? You know, we have this system that's sort of on the surface. I mean, is the system that we currently are living under the same system that the kings and queens developed, or did this Knights Templars eventually emerge and become part of what we call college?
Well, let's fast forward. We then get to a point where you have the industrialization of the world. They need great workers. And because they need great workers, what are they going to do? They're actually going to start taking all these untrained people, but they can't read or write. But they need to do basic functions. They need to be able to work and have jobs to build these vast corporations. Industries are merging. They're requiring tens of thousands of people.
And what era are we talking about now?
We're talking about late 1700s,
okay.
Early 1800s. We're talking about the need for a basic educated population. So remember, still up till then, a lot of people couldn't read and write. It was still the educated elite who could read and write. So we need to have a very fast way to educate the masses, to get them to have basic skills to be able to feed them into jobs.
Now, I always heard that where schools came from was when these industrialized sort of corporations started developing. They were picking anyone and everyone off the street, but they were hiring women because they were relatively cheap back then. And then the women would bring children to the factories, and they would get hurt or something in the machinery. So the women said, "We're not coming to work." So they said, "All right, well, we'll keep the children off to the side." So they started teaching the children, we babysit them, and they start teaching them how to work in the factory. And then around age 10, they would put them to work in the factory because they just teach them how to be safe. And so what happens next is we start seeing child labor laws show up at some point. Now you can't put a kid to work till they're 16. And so school is this weird answer to what do we do with kids until they're 16 years old?
It's train them. It's you're taking these children, you train them to be the next level of employees as the other ones get older.
Why?
So you're building a cycle to filter through good, qualified, do what you're told, follow a structure. If you ask a question and you're wrong, you're wrong. So it's a very black and white type of culture that people are trained to be good employees.
Why?
Well, it's the kind of thing we get told, go out, get a good, study hard and get a good job.
Yeah, what's with this get a good job? Why isn't it learn how to have fantastic relationships? Why isn't it learn to know who you are, what your purpose is in life, and how to, the funny thing is, if you try to go to a school to learn how to make a lot of money, they're going to teach you how to work for a corporation that makes a lot of money, but you'll never learn how to actually make a lot of money.
And if you go to college and you go and get educated to have a profession, you slot perfectly into a society to be the moving parts for the big industrial civilization as well.
So is this what you're calling the sacred knowledge? Is that knowledge about knowing yourself and having clarity and confidence in life and being able to make a huge contribution to humanity and reap the rewards that make you a lot of money?
That start as we keep moving forward, which we'll get to in a moment, that begins to emerge. So up until here, we have this mass population need to go into particular jobs, and so they're getting trained in very pigeonholed positions. So this is where you go in there, work for a company, 40 years, hopefully retire with barely enough money to live out the last few years before you die.
And that's falling apart dramatically.
Dramatically now, as we'll see as we keep
10
moving
years
forward.
gone, people's retirement plans are all being dissolved. There's all kinds of, it's falling apart. So take us through this thing now. So we start with the pyramids. We got the Knights Templars. They're guarding this special knowledge that is actually how do you really empower and create a corporation?
About character, about development, about building who you are through the metaphor of symbology of building and the knowledge of actual how to build and how to create vast creations.
So really, they're dealing with, instead of just survival skills, they're dealing with how to be extraordinary in life.
Absolutely. I mean, they're the people who build everything we see nowadays in historical times. They're the ones who are driving all of that. Versus, farming the land, eking out a mild existence and disappearing with no real future.
Right.
Now we move forward through the industrial age, and we start getting to a point around the 1950s. Where the governments are starting to study, well, how can we get people to reach their optimal potential, right? Well, and it started a shift as part of it was, there was various different government departments that were looking at psychology of people. How can we find the inner workings of people to find out what can break them down as part of the Second World War mentally, but equally at the same time, how can we find people to make them even more successful? And what happened here was what's called the human potential movement. And it was this whole group of people designing and working on people to find out what makes us tick. How do we get more successful? How do we find what's going to make us work in life and then go 10 times bigger than that.
Now, you're saying this all started in the 1950s, but if you look back at the early 1900s, where Napoleon Hill and Wallace Wattles and these guys that actually started, even Brian Tracy, who studied a lot of that stuff and brought it out in a totally different educational system than what we would call school.
Yep.
And it's interesting to know the word education comes from the word eduko, which means to bring out or to bring forth, like it's supposed to be bringing the brilliance out of you.
It's going back to Greek thought. It's Aristotle and Plato sitting with their students
right.
on the side of the buildings, evoking them to think, to become free thinkers, and give an idea for you to evolve through it.
So like the Socratic process, asking questions instead of dumping answers into people.
Like it is now.
So why is it, when did it happen that people started, education became about stuffing stuff into people instead of drawing their brilliance out of them?
It became part of that as society evolved more different jobs, more requirements, that it then became how quickly we can feed them the information we need to get them into the workplace.
I see. So the information was going so fast and the people didn't have the character built. So now it's just like, well, let's just stuff them with facts and see if we can get the...
Let's just pigeonhole everyone as possible. But if we have smart people, let's send them off to college to give them a profession to become or support people for the upper levels of the corporation.
What sparked this change in thinking in the 1950s?
Well, you had Andrew Carnegie, and Andrew Carnegie was the one who helped push Napoleon Hill to study the secrets of the rich. And so Napoleon Hill went and started studying all these rich people to find what made them successful. How come some people, the very, very few, got to create vast wealth, vast industries? And so Napoleon Hill went and interviewed all these different people and came with this idea of whatever you conceive and believe you can achieve. And then from there you had Dale Carnegie and you had a couple of other small seeds of people feed into what became the 50s with Og Mandino and some of these other great thinkers, W. Clement Stone, talking about people, hey, you can be more than you believe you can be. And that developed what we call the human potential movement. And from there, we started going into people exploring more, people asking challenging questions of themselves. Why am I this way? Am I always meant to be this way? Am I destined for 40 hours and retiring? Or can I then start my own dreams? And then that sort of evolved through a couple of these powerful personal development movements. And so you had groups called EST and LifeSpring and PsyWorld, and all these groups emerged taking this thought of how can we recreate ourselves in a moment, and by recreating ourselves become ultimately performance.
Now this sounds like the evolution of thought, but you jumped to, you made a quantum leap here. We were talking about Knights Templars, we were talking about Masons, and then all of a sudden we go into what happened, Napoleon Hill, Carnegie. What happened in between there?
You'll find a lot of the key leaders in society were still all Freemasons, still all associated.
So the Freemasons is really the people that carried this knowledge, this ancient Egyptian wisdom and knowledge through the Knights Templars.
This idea and this principles, absolutely. See, both my grandparents were Freemasons. My wife's father was a Freemason. And it intrigued me the idea of how come these incredible people in my life were Freemasons, and what is all this about the rumors and the secrecy? And so I joined. And I decided to join and find out for myself what it was. And what I found was this rich, profound, deep historical information tracing back through time about who we are, what we stand for, and about using these tools and symbols about building a life.
Now this is fascinating because I happen to have attended some of your seminars and I know what kind of education you do, and it's incredibly, it's based on play and interaction, and I mean it's
a lot of fun.
It is, it's a lot of fun, but it's also incredibly intense. Is that what these people have been going through for these thousands of years, and is that why they've actually distilled a different level of education instead of sitting somebody in a classroom for decades?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, if we go back a little bit to like the George Washington times in the tent, they would sit there and they'd talk about the principles of character and honor and integrity and all those things about building up who we are. They had become common discussion points. And so that sort of conversation didn't happen outside there.
But in a secret brotherhood.
Yes.
Now, what happened to women through all this educational stuff?
Women were not included in it. And
Why?
women still today are not included in Freemasonry. There's ancillary organizations around it, but that has still not yet caught up with women coming into this sort of knowledge.
So why is that?
I'm sure it will evolve. I'm sure at some point it will evolve and open up and include all that knowledge.
Okay, so we currently have a system where people can be empowered on this level, but I mean, what do they got to go join the Freemasons? Because now we've got all this, like I've been attending seminars that have given me a greater education than any 10 years in school.
Totally.
In one weekend. So are these people that are coming out with these workshops, the Tony Robbins and the Chris Howards and the Harv Ekers and the Brian Tracy's, your workshops, is this basically an emergence of that Freemason knowledge?
A lot of it is the emergence of that sort of knowledge now put into the public forum. So it's been taken away from some of the secret societies, some of the organizations, and it's now been distilled in a way where it's available to the public in open to attend seminars, all about business and personal growth and how to really achieve so much more.
Is this what The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know and all these quantum physics principles that seem to be emerging about self-improvement and the observer effect and how you can have an impact on your world? Is that what that...
All that stuff, and it's growing faster and faster. So coming through the 60s and then the 70s and then the 80s with Tony Robbins emerging, right, and amazing people like Mark Victor Hansen and Brian Tracy and these great distillers of this wisdom, as they're putting it all out there and more and more people are picking it up, more and more people are becoming entrepreneurs and business owners, and they're now looking outside the mainstream business model, which isn't working anymore, and they're getting dissatisfied with having that 40-hour job.
Yeah, I don't know if I've met anyone that feels like they're content in life. Everybody's going, there's got to be more to life than this. I mean, what we learned, I don't know about you, but I use about 1% of what I learned in school. And the things that I'm learning now is, you talk about how, and I'm guessing that this is how the Knights Templar develop so much power, is literally using your thoughts, getting your actions, your words, your feelings behind what you want in life, and eliminating all those limiting thoughts. So today we have an educational system outside of the school system that is available for people to take things to the next level.
If you want to study wealth, if you want to become a great doctor, you study medicine. If you want to be a great lawyer, you study law. If you want to become wealthy, where do you study? You can't go to school. You either do accounting or you do marketing, but you go into a niche. There's nowhere for you to study building wealth.
Well, I've always told people to get a mentor.
Absolutely.
Is the Freemasons a mentoring society?
It is. Within the Freemasons, there's a lot of that sort of support with each other, but equally, the seminar environment nowadays is so rich. There are so many amazing courses you can go to as an individual to better your life, find new contacts, build great networks, start a business if you want to, have a whole lot of support that wasn't there before. And it's growing. And what's happening, Greg, in society is more and more people now are moving to this entrepreneurial mindset. And you look at the speed at which companies can start and grow really, really quickly. The internet is the perfect example.
Right, social entrepreneurism. Now it's like all this wealth is draining out of the towers and it's being spread out around the world. But is that because, have there been leaks in the system? Because I know the Freemasons is a very secretive society and they protect what they do know. And if I were to ask you to disclose, tell me a little bit about the Freemasons, you have taken vows where you can't disclose that, right?
Absolutely.
So is this leaking out of the Freemasons, or is this common knowledge that is like, the humanity is just distilling
It's
now?
becoming more available to everybody. So what before used to be carried on in small groups is now become public knowledge, and of course the internet distills it all so quickly. So all these ideas about, the books like The Passion Test and all these other amazing products out there that allow you to expand your thoughts, expand your boundaries that previously were kept private, have now become so public knowledge that you can just go to these courses and just reinvent your life.
So our viewers, if they're interested in, okay, so I get it. School did not prepare me for life. School prepared me for a job.
Yeah.
So if I want to go out and be prepared for life, what are the next steps? Just you go out and start signing up for these workshops and seminars. Weekend workshops is the thing that I'm basically always
if you're on a budget, go to the library. Get some books out. There are some amazing books on personal growth, self-help, starting a business to open up the possibilities.
But you can't do it alone. Books is what school did. There's got to be a better system.
These books are different. These are not the sort of thick textbooks you have to read through.
What do they ask for? Self-improvement books?
Yeah, you can go to any library and ask for self-improvement books, and they'll take you to a whole section, and you just read one or two of those books. It'll open up a whole lot of possibilities. But to me, the real excitement is going to these multi-day seminars where you meet a whole lot of other like-minded people, change, and add people to your peer group, and then get to learn skills, practice them, and start changing your life in the direction that you want to take it, rather than how some counselor told you what to do back in high school.
So we've only got a couple more minutes, but tell me, where do you see the history of education in the future?
Where's education going? Mm-hmm. I think what we're going to see is much more people becoming entrepreneurs, much more faster, flexible on their feet. But equally so along that, we're going to find a lot more people challenged because they haven't got the safety net. See, previously you'd have a job, 40 years, retire, and you had a safety net. Now, with the worldwide situation becoming so much more competitive, you've got to be really good, really sharp, really focused to be able to make it.
So what will happen now? If we look at the educational system 20 years down the road, what are we going to see?
What we're going to see is a whole lot more of an experiential type nature where people are learning by doing rather than learning just by listening. Because most people will tell you sitting there listening for hours on end bores them, they don't retain it, and they may cram for an exam, but weeks later they've forgotten it. So we're going to see a lot more hands-on, a lot more interactive, a lot more of this course-based type material. I mean, ideally, we take that course type material we currently have out in the public domain, put that in our schools, and revolutionize the whole country.
And is this going to happen in the school system currently, the colleges and high schools, or do you think this is going to be an open enrollment system separate from that?
I think what we'll find is we'll find some innovative colleges starting to put these type of courses on. As they pick up and get great momentum, others will start modeling them and following them, and then we'll gradually start filtering it through. I don't think it's going to be a revolution where overnight it changes, but I think as more and more of it comes on board, we'll start to see a much bigger impact through our school systems.
So summarize for us the history of education.
Look, education has been the small gifts of knowledge people had throughout time, and it's moved up through time, but it's got to a point now where it's been getting dispersed, that people can start to change their own life, start to become more powerful, to learn all the skills they need to go where they want to go. And the future with the internet, dispersing information worldwide, we're on a really gifted age right now where anyone in the world can start to get access to this incredible information to define the life they want to have.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And you heard him. Head to the library. Go find out how you can be empowered in your life. Thank you for watching Life Camp.